If you are watching this on YouTube or listening to this podcast, wherever you are today, please hit that subscribe button, that follow button, so that you can stay current on the material that we are providing. But not only that, you then help us to spread the word to more people. You are vital in this mission to reaching our world of people just like you who are living in this nightmare. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism Podcast. I'm your host, Renee Swanson. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism Podcast. I'm your host, Renee Swanson, and I thank you so much for joining me today. We have a guest today. Her name is Laura, and I'm really kind of excited to talk to her. And Laura, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome, and I look forward to having you share your story with us. Laura, how long have you, have you been listening to the podcast?
I discovered you about a year and a half ago, quite by accident, as I was walking one day and looking for podcasts, and it just resonated, and it was everything I had lived, honestly. So I could really relate to really just about every episode. So
Wow.
I kept coming back. Yeah.
Okay. And so was that your introduction to covert narcissism?
It actually wasn't. I was already on a journey. I discovered narcissism in late 2018, early 2019. My father had died, and my mother, I come from that background, I finally had a name for her behavior. And it took me about 6 months before I did a deep dive into covert narcissism, because I already really knew that my husband was. And I was just afraid of the confirmation. And so that started somewhere around 2019.
Okay. Yeah. I understand that fear of the confirmation. It's like we don't want to see it. But then once we do, we jump down that rabbit hole of all the research, because then it's so validating that you can't unsee it.
Exactly. And it's surprising how many people share the same story.
It is. Mm-hmm. It is. So many similarities, yet some differences, which we're going to talk about today. Now, tell me, are you out of the marriage?
I am out of the marriage. It will be 3 months officially divorced in a couple of days. So
in a couple of days.
Yes, February.
Okay. All right. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I am doing better and better each day. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Yes. I mean, it's a roller coaster. There's a lot of emotions, but
it is. Honestly, the hardest part was getting him out and to leave and to get it final. And yes, I'm doing great, but thanks.
Okay. So one of the differences we're going to talk about today is that I didn't really deal with financial abuse in mine. I mean, some little things here and there definitely were some little pieces of it, but nothing that I would put as significant. So I reached out for guests to talk on the episodes about financial abuse, because I get asked about it a lot. And so I'd like you to share your story, so you dealt with financial abuse.
I have an extensive history with it, although I did not know that's what it was while I was experiencing it until late in the marriage. I just thought basically I was being a good spouse, a good partner. I guess it started in the earliest days of our marriage. We did not live in the state where we were both raised. And looking back, that's a little bit of the isolation that we end up with. I had no support system. But he was in a business where he was raising horses, and decided, I guess this is where all of this started, decided that we were going to own our own horses and have a horse breeding farm. And this was back in the days where not everything was so computerized and instant. So he decided we'd go and get a loan at a bank, and being the supportive wife, I guess, my credit score was a little bit better than his. And so all of this went in my name. And then he said, well, before that gets finalized, we can go to another bank and get another loan. I thought that didn't sound great, but I went along with it, and we did. And that was before I realized that he doesn't repay his debts.
Okay.
And a long struggle. It took years paying what I could pay on these loans for this business that did not go anywhere, and ruined my credit, of course. Was being harassed a lot by creditors. And sadly, I didn't learn my lesson from that. I kept repeating the same behavior, but with credit cards that he would get access to, maxed out 3 credit cards within a week. And stuck with all of those bills that he didn't help with. He also had a long history of being unemployed. He would either be employed on a horse farm or he would take 6 months off of being employed. And as maybe stated before, I didn't come from the greatest model family, so I didn't really have a great model to know that, hey, these are red flags. Maybe I should, do something about this. But I thought you support your spouse and you do what you need to do. So we basically had a history of him not wanting to work, but to work for himself. In his words, he said that no one would pay him his worth.
Wow.
Which
That's
I don't think
a narcissistic phrase if I've ever heard one.
it certainly is.
Yeah.
And I would always say, so you think I'm getting paid what I'm worth? Because I don't think anyone really thinks that we all want to make more money, but that was his justification for us never having money, because he wasn't worth him going out and getting employment because no one would pay him what he was worth. So instead, he, over the course of our 33-year marriage, came up with business after business after business that inevitably all failed due to lack of business skills. His reputation would catch up with him. Nobody would want to do business with him. He wouldn't repay people that he owed. So it's been quite the roller coaster, actually, as far as that goes.
It sounds like it. So, with these, with this path that you were on, I assume that you tried to have conversations with him about all of this.
I did, and as the marriage went on, he became more and more aggressive about the behavior. One of the activities he did when we were still living in the other state, we have since moved back to the state where our family is, about 24 years ago. But when we were living in the other state, and by this point I had 2 very young boys, and unbeknownst to me, he had ordered an online poker game, and he would take that during his periods of time where he was employed, and he would take that to work and practice. I didn't know this was going on at all. And so then he got into online gaming for real. And my first really heads up about that was, it was a couple weeks before Christmas, and money is tight. Have 2 small children. And I noticed that there's several $100s missing from the checking account as I was going to go buy Christmas presents. And I was like, hey, do you know what's going on with this? It was not confrontational or anything. And it was almost like he had this argument already in his head and had rehearsed it. And it was just did not fit the question. He just blew up and just raged and raged and raged on me. And actually, he left for 3 days without contact. And, I'm a distraught mother of 2, Christmas coming up. But before he left, I remember I reached out and touched him on the arm, grabbed him on the arm. I'm like, wait, hey, let's calm down about this so we can figure this out. And he called the police on me.
Wow.
That I was restraining him and would not allow him to leave his home. And I was just flabbergasted. That was my first really true, who is this moment? And that was in actually the late 90s when that happened. And that probably set my mind to really processing, we've got to move back where I have some kind of support.
Okay.
And actually did that within that year, because he came back after about 3 days, of course, wouldn't address any of what happened.
So it was like it just disappeared, like nothing happened.
Exactly. Yeah. And as you know, you can't bring things up, or as you learn along the way, because you get conditioned that it gets worse and worse every single time. So you just kind of, okay, he's back and it's Christmas and we want everything to be calm. So yeah, we rolled with it. But within that next year, we moved back to the state where we were both from. And that was my thinking. So I would at least have some support. My children were 6 and 3 at that point.
That was a smart choice. There is this weird kind of normalness that we can get to with them when they come back after those moments of rage or collapse. And then they come back and it's like nothing ever happened. Like they just come back into your world. They call this, abuse amnesia. And then there's this weird okay place. Like we're just okay. We can kind of keep this image up that things are peaceful, things are okay. We can actually manage to go through holidays or Christmases or even normal life until the next time.
Exactly. Everything's fine. Just pretend. Just go with it. Yes. Well, we did. We moved back, and I, after that, went back to school. I worked in a hospital laboratory, and I decided to go back to school to become a teacher, which was one of the best decisions I ever made because now I have more time off with my boys. And the next financial problem that arose from that is I had gone from being paid every 2 weeks to being paid once a month. So there's a huge budgeting difference when you only get one paycheck a month. And he would withdraw all of the money from the checking account as soon as it hit. And so the bills weren't getting paid. I was always a month behind, at least, on the phone bill, the electric bill, anything like that. I was always at least a month behind. And once again, he was going through periods of he might work, he might not work. He'd start up a new business. One of the ones he did when we first moved back to where we are now is eBay. He would buy and sell lumber and ship it to people who would make crafts. So he was always doing that. And every time he would do any business, it was all hands on deck. Every person in the family was required to either pony up money or their time, resources, anything like that. He also had a habit of borrowing money from friends, family. He got in a habit of, like I said, taking out money from the account as soon as it would hit. And then on top of that, borrowing money that he could not repay. Mm-hmm. And it was a constant cycle of just switching money around for a long time, which is very, very stressful. I'm the type of person, I budget. I need to know I have this much available. Mm-hmm. There was a time once that I had $7 in my checking account, and it was 4 days until payday.
Wow.
And I had to feed my kids. I remember so clearly going through the grocery store. Let's see, what's the most I can make? Eggs. Okay, eggs. I can get a dozen eggs, and that lasts a couple of meals. And soup, cereal, like that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And did he ever seem to put any type of genuineness or ever get vulnerable with you about what was going on and ever really face it?
No.
Yeah.
No. It
just
was
excuse after excuse or placing the blame on this, or it's that like why the businesses failed, like why it didn't work. It was always somebody else's fault.
It's someone else's fault. In fact, one of the businesses here was a retail clothing store for ladies' clothing. It started as a thrift store, and then it progressed into he had met a contact through one of the department stores where he would get their last year's markdowns and leftovers. And it was a very, very, very nice, expensive clothing. And he would sell it for a lot less. And part of the problem is that when people would come into the store, he would just be like right up in their face. Like, I have this, da, 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 da. And women don't like that. And I would try to tell him gently, women don't shop like that. You just have to let them come in and browse. And I didn't know anything, obviously, being a woman and shopping. So, that went out the door. But he got really mad and was always threatening to go to the school where I worked to tell all of my coworkers off that they knew that my husband had this store and they could see how well dressed I was, and yet they would not come over and shop there. And it was their fault that he was struggling. And I lived with that anxiety like every day. Is today the day he shows up at my work? Is today the day? And that store, and it was also he was always, it was a cycle. He would go all in, and then as it started declining, he would always have his sights on something else. He would have an out. And so it was almost like looking for an excuse. And so the final excuse on that one was the recession of '08 hit, and also another discount retailer moved in close to the same area. And he didn't even try after that. He just closed his doors, got rid of all the stuff, and moved on to what he really tried to do and thought he is his calling, which is gambling. The amount of money he has lost gambling and actually calling it his profession, thinking that he is a card player, is astounding. He would, this is probably one of the reasons we stayed married so long. Periodically, he would just move, and he would go live at a casino for 3 months. And during that
This
time,
is while you were married.
While we were married, he moved back to the state where we had moved from to own horses again. In fact, and he always tries to do too much at one time. So he might start with 1 or 2 horses, and now he's got 10, and he can't feed them. And in fact, this was at another time at Christmas. He was talking to me. He was very desperate for money because his horses needed so much. And I would try to say, probably in hindsight, passive aggressive comments to try to bring him back to reality of, well, I don't know how I'm going to pay the mortgage this month. And this one time before Christmas, he said, I would gladly give up the house. I would gladly forfeit the house if I could get that money to put toward my horses. I would gladly let the house go. And that was another huge, I've got to protect myself and my kids or we're going to be homeless.
You're going to be homeless, right?
Yes.
Right.
And this was after many, many years. I didn't buy my first home until I was in my 40s. And the home actually is only in my name because he could not be placed on the loan. He had no credible income because of his businesses, but I qualified. So that was a blessing in disguise that I didn't even realize at the time, that, well, he can't default on this loan because I'm making the payments. And so I'm going to always protect that.
Right. And so in the midst of all of this, with all of this going on, did you feel like, was there ever a time that you were thinking, okay, I want to leave this marriage, but you didn't feel like you could because of the financial situation?
Always. It was financial situation. And he also has a health condition. He has type 1 diabetes, insulin dependent diabetes. And I realize now after the fact that I was anchored in guilt, masterful guilt. Like anytime something would start creeping up where he knew he needed to start explaining something, he would come up with well, I won't live much longer anyway because of my diabetes. And oddly enough, his family enabled that as well. I've realized that after the fact too, that anytime, even now, one member of his family says, well, he's awfully sick. And I'm like, I'm not feeling guilty about this anymore.
No.
I'm just not.
No.
But that was part of it. I don't know how to get out because of the finances, but I also don't know how to get out because he doesn't work. Therefore, he doesn't have health insurance. And with my health insurance, my personal health insurance is very low. I consider very, very lucky to have that. However, the premium to add the spouse was $650 a month.
Okay.
And so I have paid that forever. And without any assistance from him, that just naturally comes out of my check. Until now, because I got a big fat pay raise when we finally did.
Right. Right.
Right.
So with all of that, then where are you now in regards to? I mean, that's a lot to deal with financially, and what you're saying, like, it makes complete sense of the guilt. You were kind of being held hostage by your own guilt. Because here he would be, without health insurance, without income, and he's got the diabetes, and the family's gone, he's really sick. Talk about a guilt trip.
Yes. And then the normal guilt stuff of my boys and their father, and I don't want them to come from a broken home. But of course, that is the regret that I live with, is I didn't do it sooner. And they were raised in this toxic environment. My boys are 30 and 27 now. And are doing well, but they bear the scars, of course.
Of course.
They don't come out unscathed.
Yeah.
But I'm doing really well now. I made the decision probably 10, maybe 11 years ago. I'm not really sure. It was definitely after the comment about I would gladly let the house go back to the bank so I could pay for my horses. I split the checking account. And I honestly don't know what took me so long, but I got my own checking account and I redid my direct deposit, and there was no access for him to have to my account. And that was very scary because the rage really rained down upon me. And I did find one of the things that the financial situation brought out in me is it made me become a little bit of a white liar. And I don't like that. Over the course of the years, everything had a price tag on it. Well, how much did that cost? And whether it was something I needed or not, I found myself shaving off a couple of dollars every time. If it was $10, oh, it became $7.99. Just little things like that. But when I did my own checking account, of course, he wanted to know why. And the truth of that is I had been hacked on my Amazon account. And so I wanted to secure my money. The untruth about that is that I said that, well, my work is requiring me to have a secure bank account now because I'm vulnerable. And so he didn't question that. And then he would get mad. He would get mad every month when he knew my check had been deposited, and he would ask me for money. Can you loan me $500 just till tomorrow? And I'm like, well, I have, and this is the truth, all of the automatic bills are coming out now, so I'm not late. And so I don't have that. I don't have that. And he would pressure and pressure and pressure, the pressure constantly. But the plus side is that was the turning point, is when I did that. I slowly dug myself out of the hole of being late on all of my bills and became current on everything. Was actually able to pay off both of my boys' cars. It just, once you start in that progression, it just kind of snowballs in the positive way if you can stay with that. And it's hard. I mean, it's
hard.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stress around it and a lot of sacrifice.
When I bought this house, I barely qualified. I had to work. I went to a class on how to buy a home, how to clean up your credit to buy a home. And I did all of these things. And I still had probably the lowest credit score you could have and buy a home, which came with a higher interest rate. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to say I refinanced 3 years ago with him mocking me the whole time. I refinanced and shaved off 6 percentage points of my interest. I'm going to pay it off 12 years earlier. I'm on a path. And now I even pay more on my mortgage every month so I can pay it off. But the whole time I was going through this process, he was still in the home. And it was, think of all the money you've lost. Just think of, you've thrown all this money away all these years. Why bother now? And so every positive I've tried to do for myself was met with a negative from him. And part of that is, I guess he's just too darn lazy to even try. And it is, I guess, misery loves company also, trying to knock me down. But the
narcissistic personality is very competitive, very antagonistic, very competitive. And so they have to one-up you. They have to knock you down so that so that you are beneath them.
Right. I actually bought a car in 2017. We were still married. This is before I knew the names for any of this. And it was very scary because I hadn't had a car payment in a long time. I was still driving a minivan. I'd go to work. I was the only one in my minivan. It was great when my boys were little, but here I am driving the 7-passenger van. And I decided I wanted a car, and it took me 6 months looking to buy a car. And I didn't buy anything close to new. It was 7 years old. But it was a Dodge Charger, an older model. And I was so proud of that car. And I got a great deal, a great loan. But my down payment I was getting a tax refund. We were getting a tax refund. And that was going to be my down payment. And I mistakenly sent it to the joint account. And he was at the bank that day that it came in and checked the balance and wiped it out.
Wow.
And when I confronted him about it, I was met with rage because he had a right to that, which technically he did not, because the jobs that he would work, he would not have any taxes taken out. I'm having the maximum taken out of my check. He's having basically nothing taken out. So not only did he not really pay his taxes yet, but then he took my refund.
Wow.
And his whole comment was, well, I'll give it back, which he never did. But I went on and still bought the car, had a decent payment, traded it in 2020 for an upgrade, and just traded that one in July for the car that I've really, really wanted, which was the Dodge Challenger, which is a nicer model. And he always knew I wanted that car, and he talked so badly about that car. I don't know why anybody would want one of those. This one is so much better. And well, now, of course, I know, like you said, the competition and
the constantly belittling and undercutting and sabotaging and
right. And yeah, meanwhile, he can't get a loan to save his life, like truly. I went from the rock bottom credit score to now, I think I checked it last week and it was 826.
Good for you.
And
good for you.
It's been a hard drive, but now I know if my dryer quits today, knock on wood, I can close and I can have one here tomorrow. I mean, I know I have that confidence that I never, ever, ever had. I have spent some time and money updating my house that desperately needed it. Some basic upgrades, because that's another thing I've learned about narcissists. They let things go and they fall into disrepair. And I've spent some money really doing some upgrades. And I'm really happy because I have that satisfaction. I've done it myself. So
yeah, good for you. I'm really, really super glad to hear that. And what I hear is that there's hope for those people out there who are financially trapped. You started by opening your own account. Yes. This was in the marriage. This was 10 years ago, I think you said.
Yes.
And, take those steps. You guys that are out there listening and you're feeling like, that can seem massively scary. And you voiced it. It is. But take those steps. You are full-grown adults. You have the ability to be responsible, with your own finances and your own situation, and let them be responsible for them. Take those steps.
Right. And it's hard. That would be my one message to anyone. And I know men are victims as well. I think this falls a lot on women, that a lot of women don't know their financial health. I do know some men, now that I'm saying that, I do know some men that they let their wives just handle everything. But not knowing your financial health puts you vulnerable and puts them even more in charge. And it's scary, but you do baby steps. I followed that, getting my checking account, to whenever I would get money as gifts, I would tuck it away like in a pocket in a coat in my closet. And I actually once jokingly told my boys, if something happens to me, you cannot give my clothes to Goodwill without going through all the pockets.
Make sure that your family knows. Yes.
And at one time I had about $1,500 in cash. And I thought, this is crazy. I can open up a savings account that he doesn't have access to as well.
Right. Good
and
for
so
you.
I've actually opened up two savings accounts that were just mine. One of them, because I'm a teacher, I don't get paid through the summer. And I had to calculate how much money I needed to survive through the summer. And the very first thing I do is pay myself every month. I put it in that savings account that does not get touched. And so then I have income for the summer. But just those little tiny steps, knowing when your power bill is due. I didn't even know we were so behind on some of the things that he would supposedly be in charge of, that he was just neglecting. Yeah. But taking those little steps.
Well, Laura, thank you for sharing your story here. I think it's a great story of hope, a story that says, hey, there are ways out from under the weight of all of this, and start taking those little tiny baby steps. So, Laura, thank you so much for sharing that today.
Thank you so much for having me and for giving this forum so people can get out and become educated.
You're very welcome. And everyone out there listening, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope that you take these words that we're saying. And I know one of my mottos was every day, just do the next right thing. The one thing, what is my one thing today that I need to do that gets me in a healthier position, a healthier place. So I wish everyone out there, I wish you so much peace on that journey of healing. You have been listening to the Covert Narcissism Podcast with your host, Renee Swanson. Be sure to check out our website at www.covertnarcissism.com. There you will find many resources just for you to help you on this journey. You can also reach out to me by email at Renee, RENEE, at cnglifecoaching.com. Those letters are CNG, as in Covert Narcissism Group. I do look forward to hearing from you. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. The information provided by Renee Swanson and the Covert Narcissism Podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes and not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. It does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support an allegation or a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of the material and information provided.